Welcome to another episode of Distilling the West. I'm your host, Dan, joined by my co-host, Dave. How you doing over there, Dave?
I am doing well. I'm super excited for today's podcast.
Yeah, we have a great episode for you guys today. A little bit of a different one. We're not interviewing a distillery. We met this guest at the American Craft Spirits Association annual conference in Sacramento and at the Grand Tasting. And it was so interesting meeting Anna Mantheakis with Bubble Cap Consulting. So welcome to the podcast, Anna.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great having you on today. And, we met you there at the conference and you had such an interesting story. And I'm so glad that you were forthcoming with your story and the kind of special set of skills that you have that you bring to your consulting company and, hook in with distilleries and apply those skills. So really, we're here for you today. So we'd love an introduction from you and, tell us a little bit about your background and before you got started doing your own consulting work. What were you doing?
Yeah, so I I was in wine before I became a distiller. I was a winemaker for 6 years. I went to school for that. I got my master's degree from UC Davis.
Okay.
Oh, great.
And I am a scientist. So I did a master's thesis in yeast microbiology of fermentation.
Cool.
And then I really loved wine, but spirits was always my the thing I wanted to try one day,
Okay.
right? And so after I'd made wine for long enough, I found an opportunity to switch into distilling, which was something that I always kind of dreamed about. And that was in 2021.
Okay.
And then I worked at Westward Whiskey for 4.5 years, where I was mentored by Miles Monroe in blending. So I was on the blending team at Westward.
Very cool.
And I grew so much at Westward, and I had like very cool projects where being a bit of the scientist in the distillery, I would end up working on technical developments as well as doing sensory work and quality management.
Okay.
And in so doing, I built a lot of skill, right? I built a lot of skill that way that I ended up bringing to projects outside of Westward. I took on a consulting gig working on recipe development for the Four Corners gin with Christian Krogstad, who made Aviation.
Okay. All right.
And we won Best New Spirit for that recipe at ADI in 2024.
Awesome. All right.
Very proud of it. It's made all with American botanicals, all these plants that grow naturally across North America,
Super.
right? And then and now I'm independent. I'm doing independent consulting with my under my company Bubble Cap Consulting that I started. And I offer technical development services. I've experience with yield improvements,
Okay.
for example, and recipe development, and also blending. So I have projects with a couple different brands along those lines. Um, Developing recipe and process for a new Indian single malt that we hope to see released later this year. That involved a month-long trip to India back in August, which was incredible.
That's so cool.
And I was in Uttarakhand province near the feet of the Himalayas, as well as in southern India near Goa. I hit a couple spots. And in addition to that, I've been working on a separate project developing a super old shouldn't say super old because it's a good thing, right?
Yeah,
It's a super premium 30-plus-year-old Irish whiskey,
Wow.
Irish single malt blends for Napoke Castle.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we are kind of like I'm part of a team developing like the concept and the blend for this very, very special, very limited release that will also we anticipate come out later this year
Oh, cool.
of whiskey that has been resting in casks for more than 30 years, which is
That's
really
crazy.
incredible to taste and work with.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really
and
good
aside from
work there.
that, I'm kind of doing the freelance life, which is, discovering new things and trying new things and being like, all right, I'm gonna see if I can do this. And so I picked up some freelance writing.
Oh,
Um, Yeah. Yeah. I just completed an article for Distiller magazine that will come out in the summer, and I'm working on my next one.
Very cool.
That's another thing I enjoy doing a lot is whiskey writing, or spirits writing, I should say.
Very cool. Well, when we were hanging out at the American Craft Spirits Association, and I forget who it was, but someone said, "Oh, have you met Anna?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And they, of course, said, "Oh, well, she has this really interesting skill, or anyways, they mentioned that you have synesthesia, and so a lot of our listeners may not know what that is, and of course, that doesn't, I'm sure, wholly define you as a person, but it was so interesting and intriguing to me of what that is and how that can be applied to the spirits world. And so I would love for our listeners, A, to know what synesthesia is, and then B, just kind of how that, like you mentioned, you weren't maybe necessarily fully aware of it, but how it came to be formed to you as kind of a thing in your life and how it's applied in your life in its current form.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Um, One thing I'll start with, having met many other people now with synesthesia, because I've become really active in the community, the greater
Mhm.
community of people with synesthesia, which is a far-flung community spanning many countries, because the rarer your synesthesia, the farther you have to go to find somebody else who has it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, is that we nobody thinks I have synesthesia as a child.
Mm,
Nobody thinks of themselves as different as a child.
right.
We all think we're totally normal
Right.
until we find out that we're having an experience other people don't share, which to us is so ordinary, it feels mundane, but to other people is wild to think about. So for me, I'll start with the general definition of synesthesia, I
Yeah.
suppose. Synesthesia is when you have blended senses. A stimulus to one sense causes an experience in another
Mm,
due to hyperconnectivity in the brain.
mhm.
And neuroscientists have studied it a lot. They've answered a lot of questions about synesthesia, but they've come up with just as many questions.
Mhm.
Which is what
That's how it
tends to
goes.
happen in
Yeah.
research, right?
That's
Yeah.
science.
A lot of things about synesthesia are not very well understood.
Mhm.
But one of the things that they understand is that the brains of people with synesthesia are hyperconnected, and so there's this firing between brain regions that don't normally stimulate each other. So you'll end up with musicians who hear sounds like music, they're listening to music,
Mhm.
and the brain receives a sound, and that brain activity stimulates parts of the brain responsible for vision,
Mm.
and they're seeing colors
Right.
while they're hearing music. Most people have heard of somebody with that kind of synesthesia. Musicians who see colors while they listen to music or any sound,
Right.
right? But there's so many ways that this can happen.
Mm.
Some people hear words and they taste flavors. They have tasty words. Words have flavors for them. The other people hear a sound and they feel a sensation on their body, right? Well, some people taste things and see colors. There's so many ways to combine the senses that there's more than 60, maybe like more than 80 types of synesthesia
Okay.
that have been documented. I forget what number, I forget which one is like the official number, because they keep updating it as they find more of
Yeah.
us.
Right.
And some people have many types all at once, right? Some people have 12 forms. I've met a woman who had 60 forms of synesthesia.
Oh
I
my
don't know
God.
how she gets through her day because that sounds
Just
overwhelming.
yeah, just so much
Yeah.
sensory overload.
So much. And she's a very you can tell when you speak to somebody who has that much synesthesia, you can tell that the whole world is affecting them all at once.
Mhm.
So for me, sounds distort flavor. I always thought that was completely typical until I found out it wasn't. The sounds in my
Okay.
environment change what I am tasting, and I compare it to the way the light changes the colors that we see.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're looking at a landscape painting in neutral light, you may appreciate all these beautiful colors that the artist used to render the landscape. And if somebody changes the light to a red light, all of those colors will change instantly.
Yeah.
because that limits what you can see and it shapes what you can see. And the landscape will look very different. You'll still see a landscape, but it'll be a different landscape than what it was before.
Yeah.
And if I'm tasting whiskey and somebody like turns on the music or changes in some way, turns on a fan or a motor or any sounds,
Yeah.
it will instantly change how the whiskey tastes.
Hmm.
The whiskey becomes distorted and reshaped by the sound in my environment. And I spent 6 years of my professional life actively blocking this trait out.
Hmm. How would you do
If
that?
I Well, I used to wear earplugs every time I tasted,
Okay.
or I would put on a pair of noise canceling headphones but have the sound turned off.
Okay.
Hmm.
That's what I did when I was a winemaker
Yeah.
because I was educated by some of the best educators there are. I went to UC Davis, to approach wine tasting with a sense of discipline, which is really important. And also to be aware of my own bias and try to exclude or reduce bias. Try to reduce, and especially knowing the effect your environment can have on you. You want it to bias you as little as possible. That means creating neutral tasting environments, being really aware of whether you have a cold, how you're feeling that day, what you just ate, right?
Yeah.
And coming to tasting with sense of discipline and neutrality. And if what I'm tasting changes with the sounds around me, it felt like it compromised me, like I wasn't consistent and I wasn't reliable,
Okay.
which caused me terrible anxiety for many years.
Hmm.
But it was a mistake
Hmm.
to block this out, I found with time, because my brain needs sounds to be sensitive to flavor.
Okay.
If I taste in total silence, everything is just kind of bland.
Hmm.
There's flavor, but there's less. It's like you turned the volume down.
So, was there a seminal moment that, like I don't know, a switch flip that you were like, you know what, I really need to have some sort of external stimulus, or is it just something that you gradually came into in time?
I remember some moments. One that I remember was being at the blending table with the lead winemaker who I used to work with. We would blend together,
Hmm.
and he was more sensitive to phenolics and astringency than I was or am. And we'd be going around the table tasting the same wines, and you'd say, I find this really aggressive. And to me, it just didn't seem that aggressive.
Yeah.
So then I would secretly take one earplug out, and I wouldn't say anything because I did not like calling any attention to myself. And I would let the hiss of the ventilation
Hmm.
come into one ear, and that immediately raised the astringency
Wow.
of the wine
Okay.
because that sound enhanced astringency. Sounds also affect how things feel in my mouth. Mouthfeel, astringency, sharpness, burn, and it helped bring me closer to him. And at the same time, each time I did that, I'd notice a little peak in certain flavors.
Okay.
I get a little boost to that fresh cherry note that was dull before, and now I can taste it so much more with the hissing sound.
Hmm.
And those were the moments when I was aware that with earplugs in, I'm not getting everything, right? I'm not sensitive to everything. There's things that I'll miss. I just didn't know how to exercise any control over my senses, and that scared me so much that I didn't want to try until I decided to become a distiller and reinvent myself. And it seemed like a chance to do things differently without having to tell anybody what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting, and thank you for explaining that to us. And it's so funny coming into this. I kind of had some preconceived notions of synesthesia and how it may be showing up to you, for you. And of course, like when we were at the tasting, every once in a while I would notice like your headphones on and maybe not on. And so it's so interesting with preconceived notions and what you're describing is because I was kind of envisioning it as showing up for you more on the back end of the tasting experience, but what I'm hearing you describe is more of the stimulus that's coming in on the front end of the tasting
Absolutely.
experience and kind of
Yes.
what is going on in your environment and affecting the tasting experience itself, and then finally what's coming out on the back end. So that's really interesting.
It affects me from the moment my lips touch the glass.
Yeah,
It affects me all the time.
sure.
I mean, I could be driving my car, and if I have a taste in my mouth, right, the
Yeah.
aftertaste of my toothpaste, then when I turn on my car, that taste will change.
Oh, that's
So
really
I
interesting.
sometimes I notice a difference in like the change in the music or the noise in the room because what I smell in the room changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because when I was coming into it, I was thinking, oh, while she's tasting, she must see, hear, taste different shapes, colors, sounds, and stuff. But really, what I'm hearing you describe is more um, setting your environment with intention to kind of set the scene around the tasting itself. Am I describing that accurately?
You are, yeah. And what you were imagining is true of other forms of synesthesia.
Right.
So there are many forms of synesthesia where taste is what we call the inducer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Taste is the sense that induces experiences in your other senses. And so when you hear about people tasting words, tasting shapes, right?
Yeah.
Not tasting words, right? So when you hear about somebody having tasting in shape or
Mm-hmm.
tasting in color,
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
right? Or having rare synesthesia, but sounds for flavor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those people take a sip and they're having all these additional experiences derived
Sure.
from the flavor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas for me, sound is my inducer. The sounds that I'm hearing will distort the flavor. And for me to be consistent and reliable and to have experiences that align with other people, I need to control that because sounds can massively distort flavor to the point where what I am tasting is not what anybody else is tasting.
Right.
It's just bad and weird. Like, I could be tasting a lovely Chardonnay in a room at a conference filled with people who are talking really loudly, and I take a sip, and it's hot, and it tastes like somebody took ditch water and they dumped it in the Chardonnay, but then they raised up the acid and the alcohol, like, to be, like, twice as acidic and twice as hot.
Yeah.
And then that's why it's such a problem where if I don't have any control, if somebody approaches me and says, "How does this taste?" There's not much I can say to them
Right.
in that situation.
So I have to imagine. Well, let me just slow down. Um, the word intention kind of comes to mind when I'm hearing you describe your experience. And so, do you feel that um, with the synesthesia, that the particular uh, variety that you um, have, does that lend itself to um, really setting up the intention prior to stepping into that experience? And does that kind of, you know, not only flavor your experience in the spirits world, but also like your interactions with people in social settings and gatherings, and maybe even in your own personal life, like before you're about to go do whatever it might be in your day. Do you again, that word intention comes to mind of like kind of setting up the parameters of setting the scene before you actually, you know, kind of think of like an improv class of like, okay, go. We're doing an improv scene right right now.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
what this means is that I always have to be prepared
Yeah.
okay? Yeah.
because if I'm gonna taste anything professionally, I have devoted many uncountable hours of my life to figuring out
Mm-hmm.
how to use sound to my advantage, which I'll describe to you. Be happy
Yeah.
to tell you how that works.
Yeah.
And anytime I taste something professionally, I need to come prepared. I come with my sounds.
Okay.
And I am a person who always walks back into my apartment to make sure I didn't leave the burner on.
Yep.
uh, which is not unusual for people to have, like lots of synesthesia and be a little bit of a space cadet. So so I know that I'm not gonna be able to like sit down and remember everything I need to do in advance every time. So instead what I do is I just have my sounds saved to all my devices.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I have them on my computer and I have my sounds on my phone and I have multiple pairs of earbuds and headphones and I just make sure that anywhere I am, I have some way to access my sound library so that I can use it. And if I don't have it, that's when I start doing weird things like saying excuse me and going to the next room and like turning on the sink
Right.
so I can taste with the hissing sound of the water. Hope that nobody asks any questions because when I have to explain myself.
So I guess so my first encounter with you at the conference, you ran over to the group I happened to be talking to and you asked someone to please make a specific sound and hum while you
Yep.
tasted a cocktail or a beverage. And obviously at this point you know what sounds you need to hear to taste certain things. What was it like going from your early wine days when you were blocking everything out to where you are now? Like, what was that experimentation process like to figure out what sounds brought out the right profiles?
It was like walking in the forest in the dark
Mhm. Yeah.
because I don't have a map of every possible sound.
Right.
I don't have a picture of that landscape. And I'm also not an audio engineer. So I don't even have a language to talk about that landscape.
Mm.
What I have is a lifetime of experience hearing sounds and feeling them because sounds have textures for me. That's another kind of synesthesia I have. And I can draw from that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I just had to sit down and try many different sounds and see what happens. I'm not really able to guess. If I haven't tried the combination before, I'm not really able to guess what a sound is going to do for a particular flavor profile.
Okay.
I can come up with an idea, but I don't know
Mm.
Right.
until I try it,
Yeah.
right? And then once I've tried it a few times, then I know, okay, this is what this sound does to whiskey or does to the flavors I expect to find in this whiskey. So I found a website for audio files called freesound.org.
Okay.
And I just started downloading everything from the sound of like a circular saw to crickets and cicadas to somebody playing a clarinet to all sorts of synth noises.
Right.
And I chose tones, consistent tones. So I go for drones and hums.
Yeah.
I don't go for music because playing a lot of different sounds is going to do a lot of different things to my brain.
Right.
Yeah.
My sounds all sound like ooh or sort of sounds.
Okay.
And then trying them with wine and
Yeah.
just like appreciating the differences they made for wine and sounds have very specific effects on flavor where they will enhance or diminish particular flavors.
Okay.
And they can also if I'm hearing a lot of different sounds at once, like I think of it as a broad frequency spectrum, it can even have kind of a deleting effect. Flavors will disappear.
Mm. Mhm.
So I look for sounds that gave me a little enhancement in flavors that I wanted to notice or that were useful for me to track. And if I find two sounds that have like very opposite effects on what I'm tasting, then it is like tasting two different wines.
Huh.
And that's when I have a small panic attack and I wonder if what I'm doing will ever be helpful to me in any way. But I've learned that it actually is incredibly helpful to me because the way I taste is just foundationally different from the way other people taste. There is no one way that things taste to me. I taste in cross sections. It's like looking at a three-dimensional object and turning it around or slicing it up, right? I taste things with a few different sounds to experience the flavor profile a few different ways with different things enhanced and diminished. And then I put them back together in my head as a composite. And that's how I understand flavor. And I
Interesting.
do this while talking to other people a lot.
Mhm.
So I know that the experience I'm having isn't like I haven't pushed the buttons so hard that I'm completely misaligned with other people. I want to
Yeah.
know that the experience I'm having brings me closer to the experience of other people.
That's super cool.
Here you go. And I've
Yeah.
learned that I think that there are multiple advantages I've found in doing it like this. One is that if I'm tasting with somebody who from the outset I just feel like our palates are different,
Mm-hmm.
then I can play around
Wow.
with different sounds on my playlist and see if one of them brings me closer to that person.
Kind of like tuning your guitar to
I'm
drop
tuning my brain.
D or something. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm tuning my brain. And it's not always going to get me there because we all have different noses, right? I don't get to control what olfactory receptors I was born with. I don't get to control the nose that I got. We all get our own noses and everybody has their physical limitations in what they're sensitive to. But there have been enough times where changing tracks on my playlist got me closer to the other person that I try it every time now
Okay.
just to see. And when it brings us closer to each other, that's a huge benefit to my work. The other thing where I find an advantage in doing in tasting the way I do is when it comes to blending, it helps me screen for particular flavors. And if somebody is noticing a particular flavor more than I am, I could tune into that.
That makes sense.
So when I was learning to blend at Westward and Miles was training me, I learned rather quickly that Miles is more sensitive than I am to cislactone. At least with the sounds that I was using, I was less sensitive than him to cislactone. And I made a blend for him, and he said, "I think this is kind of high in cislactone. Will you do this again?" And so I started flipping through my playlist with a sample that he confirmed smelled like it had appreciable cislactone to him. Until I found a sound, and I'll play it for you if you want to hear it. I found a sound that enhances it for me. It makes me more sensitive to cislactone specifically.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, the cislactone, I mean, I'm generally familiar with lactones or usually kind of the coconut um, kind of flavors, but is cislactone even more specific than that?
So yeah, in high amounts, it actually tastes different to me at different levels,
Mm.
which is not uncommon, right? Aromatics can be qualitatively different to us depending on how strong they are. Ethyl acetate in low quantities can be sweet and a little fruity. And when it's above your recognition threshold, it smells like nail polish remover, for example. That's true of everybody.
Yeah.
And my experience with cislactone in whiskey is when there's just a little bit of it, it kind of tastes like a cherry soaked with bourbon. So it kind of smells like fruity and bourbony almost.
Yeah.
And when there's a lot of it, it smells very coconutty to me.
Okay.
And I was looking for these low, subtle quantities of cislactone so I could match myself with Miles, who was my mentor, and I could make blends that he likes and that he approved. And the sound that I found by trial and error, I found the sound by experimenting with a sample that I knew had it. And then once I could smell it, I went through my other samples and screened until I found another one that smelled to me like it had cislactone, brought that to Miles and said, "Does this smell like cislactone to you?" And he said yes. And that's when I knew I was onto something.
Okay.
That's cool.
Right. Um, yeah, it's one of my least favorite sounds. I actually really hate it
Gosh.
because I don't get to choose. I was just born with this brain.
That's
You don't
true.
get to you
Yep.
don't just get to choose a brain, but it's somebody playing a clarinet that sounds like this. Can you hear that?
No, we're not picking it up.
This has happened before. I think the microphone like screens out
Okay.
drones in order to
Yeah.
screen out background noise, and I
Sure.
don't know how to change that setting. I'll
Right.
try turning it up and playing it one more time.
Yeah, put it close.
Yeah, put it right up next to the mic.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yep. Play it one more time.
Got it the first time. Yeah.
All right. You know what? Email us or text us that clip. We'll post it on our Instagram.
Okay, great. I had it touching the microphone.
We
It's very loud.
That's so weird how I can
Piercingly
do that.
loud.
Yeah. That's funny.
I better turn the volume back down on my phone
Yeah.
before I forget later, or that will be a bad day for me
Yeah.
next time I have my headphones in. Yeah.
Yeah, so we heard a
But
brief
yeah,
note there,
it's sort of an unpleasant
Got a little bit of
sound.
it. Yeah.
and that's what made you taste that
And that makes me more, it just
coconutty.
makes, I don't know, I can't tell you why because I'm not a neuroscientist,
Yeah.
and even neuroscientists can't tell you why.
Sure.
But it raises my sensitivity enough that after that, I never had another blend that was excessive in cislactone, at least to my knowledge, and I trust
Yeah.
Miles would have told me.
Right. That's super cool.
So how do you take that to multiple different distilleries as a consultant now, where every environment you're going in and the people you're working with are different, every environment's different. How does that work
Yeah,
for
so
you?
if I'm working with, if I'm, I could be tasting side by side with another maker, or I could be interacting with a team that's giving me like a request for a flavor profile. Wherever I am, um, I'll start by just finding a way for us to taste something together and we all talk about it because I want to hear as much from them as possible about what they're tasting. It tells me what the other people in the room are sensitive to, and it tells me what matters to them.
Mm.
And as we're going through that, I'm kind of checking the things off in my mind. Am I picking this up too? And then what are the things I'm noticing that they're not that I think would be beneficial to bring to their attention, right? Because we all have something to bring to the table. And I might have notes on the finish or on this like peppery note, whatever it is that I bring to them. And they say, yeah, actually, that's a great observation. Let's add that to the conversation. This is a sort of work that sensory professionals do all the time with each
Okay.
other, where we are aligning ourselves to each other. And while I'm aligning myself to other people, I'm also using my sounds. I'm playing through my sort of core sounds that I use all the time, and I'm seeing how far they get me. And if they don't get me all the way there, if there's something that everybody else at the table notices that really matters to them a lot, and I'm not very sensitive to it, it seems low to me, I'm not picking it up in the same way as other people, that's when I start looking for different sounds on my playlist to see if a sound can bring me closer.
Okay.
It may be like a citrusy note or a honey note or a sharp edge, astringent edge, or whatever's coming up the most. And I usually try to focus in on sensory attributes that are noticed by several people because we all have hypersensitivities. So it's very normal to be tasting side by side with another maker who notices and mentions things that just don't stand out to you because that's their nose. And
Yeah.
that's fine. I don't get too hung up on those things. I look for the things that several people are consistently mentioning that I might not be as sensitive to with the sounds that I'm using. And that's when I start reaching for new ones. And then again, it's trial and error. It's me going into my library where I've collected about 50 sounds that if I find that have helped me in one way or another and just seeing what happens.
Oh, that's so interesting. Do you find
Yeah, so I have one that gives me kind of a signal boost in this oily avocado oil but sweet sort of honey flavor that comes out near the tails cut during distillation.
Mm.
And I'll listen to that one when I'm approaching a tails cut as a distiller. And I also listen to that while I'm tasting whiskey because it makes me so more sensitive to these sort of oily, heavier flavors
Yeah.
that I want to have an awareness of while I'm blending. For example, uh,
I'm sorry.
I hope I did trail off there. I kind of trailed off.
No,
Sorry.
It's okay.
that's great though. No, I feel like you kind of answered one of the questions I had that it sounds like you do have kind of certain sets of sounds that you might apply as you're approaching a whiskey. Maybe if you're hopping over to a brandy, you might be getting some other sounds lined
Yeah.
up.
So my whiskey sounds were driven by like really two endeavors. My experience in distilling and making the whiskey. I go back to the sounds that helped me as a distiller at the still making cuts. because there were sounds I used more like at the tails and at the heads cut
Mm-hmm.
to manipulate my own sensitivity so that I could track the flavors I needed to track.
Yeah.
And those end up being really useful for evaluating finished whiskey too.
Okay.
And then there are the sounds that I learned to use through blending and through seeking out feedback on my blends from a lot of people.
Mm.
And I have my core collection of those whiskey related sounds,
Yeah.
right? And then I'll use those with other spirits, but when I get into the more botanical spirits, gin and brandy has a lot of herbaceous notes, then I typically will gravitate. This is going to sound weird at first, but when I explain it, it makes sense. I'll gravitate toward insect sounds,
Okay.
so crickets and cicadas. And I think the reason this works for me is because I grew up in the woods. I grew up in the Applegate Valley. Have you been to the Applegate Valley? Because you were in Northern California for a while.
Oh,
So
is that kind of like Ashland, Medford area?
yeah, so if you started Ashland Medford in the Rogue Valley, and
Okay.
then you drove 45 minutes out into the hills,
Right.
and then you crossed a river, and then you took like a half-mile driveway
So
up into the
more near.
woods. And then you're just past everybody's property, and if you
Yeah.
go any further, it's BLM land until the California border.
Right.
I was there.
Yeah.
And so where I learned as a child to recognize the scent of oregano in the summertime and the smell of the trees and the grass and all the flowers blooming in the evening, the sounds around me were natural sounds. There were sounds of birds and there were the sounds of insects. And I think that those sort of like crickety sounds and those insect sounds were were the canvas on which my brain learned to interpret flavor. And so they make botanical flavors much more recognizable to me. And I'll go back to them a lot when I'm working with gin. I
Yeah.
used cricket sounds the whole time I was working on the Four Corners gin recipe.
Okay.
Cool.
And it was very good because it kept me like really dialed in. It enhanced the flavors that were important and really key to putting together that gin profile. And I can just recognize things better that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Like we just recently talked with Dave Smith from St. George, and he really uses the phrase sense memories
Yeah.
quite frequently when they're coming up with their different recipes for their gins and their whiskeys and stuff like that. And he is just an amazing storyteller. And so I guess I'm getting a little crossover, as you're describing your experience. And so do you feel that kind of that term of sense memory holds weight with you? And, do you feel like you kind of are drawing upon some of those sense memory experiences as the sounds of the crickets and cicadas of your childhood and kind of the senses of drawing in those smells and stuff? Does it kind of help you bring all of that together into the experience?
I think so, because I think that my memories are formed in the context where I was tasting things.
Mhm.
And I won't you know how you take a sip of a beverage that you had when you were like 15 and it instantly takes you back to the moment you had it before.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah.
That moment. Yeah,
Yep.
I will not have that moment unless I'm tasting it with the sounds
Okay.
that I was hearing
Right.
back when I was 15 and I had it
Okay.
before,
Totally.
because it doesn't taste the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I went much of my adult life thinking that nobody grows raspberries like the raspberries we had at my house when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They just don't taste the same.
Right.
Until I was eating raspberries at a house I lived in Vallejo while I worked my first harvest in Napa. And the whoosh of the freeway was just in the air, the shh of the cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those raspberries tasted just like my childhood. And that was when I realized that it's because I was eating them next to the river I grew up on. I'd be down by the river eating raspberries with this rushing sound of the river in the background, and it made them taste like nice and fruity, but also a little bit like leaves and like those beetles that sometimes you find on the raspberry vines.
Yeah.
Like this, I don't know how to describe a beetley flavor, but imagine that. That was the flavor of the raspberries. Those were the good raspberries that we grew that I ate down by the river, and they taste like that if I have a similar sound in my environment. And then I'm immediately transported. I'm taken back to being a kid and standing barefoot in the raspberry bushes, eating them next to the river.
That's awesome. So,
Uh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I had a random question popped in my mind. So, unrelated to distilling and spirits in general, but I don't know if you are the cook in your household or your fiance is, but if your fiance makes something that you're not particularly fond of, can you like adjust the sound and the environment to make it
Oh,
more
immediately.
better? That's fantastic. I wish I
Yeah,
had that.
if I try anything that I'm not especially fond of, and that's what we're eating, then I get out my headphones.
That is amazing. I am jealous of that.
Does that ever create arguments? You're like, honey, you're pulling out the headphones. Are you
Well,
pleased with my dinner? I just worked so hard on for hours in the kitchen.
not yet, but if she listens to this podcast,
Oh no, we're outing you. I love it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I think she'll laugh.
Totally, totally. That's awesome.
So,
But yeah, and if it could be a cocktail at a bar, it could be something I'm eating in a restaurant, anywhere I am. If I have my headphones and I'm like not a huge fan of it, I'm like, great, how can I change this?
that's awesome.
Interesting.
It's a
There you
superpower.
go.
It's a superpower.
It's hard for me to think of it that way because there was this big period of my life where I had no control and it messed me up so much. But
Yeah.
I appreciate your appreciation.
Yes, I really do. And so I wanna ask, so you you were a blender at one particular place and now you're a consultant.
Yeah.
What is that life like for you now that you're not tied to essentially one product portfolio and you can kind of branch out and do more things?
Oh, I love the variety of things that I get to do when I'm not tied to one product portfolio. I am a creative person who loves discovering something else and something new, right?
Yeah.
So so in my consulting work, I've gained familiarity with an exposure to brands that are so different from each other, with such a diversity of flavor. And each time I'm kind of learning to play the game in a new way,
Hmm.
and it just excites me. I love it. I love getting to I don't know, it can be scary when you're stepping into new territory and you
Right.
haven't done this particular thing before and you got a lot of catching up to do, a lot of work to do familiarizing yourself with similar products and understanding the ask, but it just opens up a new world each time.
Yeah.
And and I love blending. And I just love working with my nose and my palate.
Yeah.
Yeah, each barrel, each sample is a tiny discovery. And putting them together in just the right way is like solving this beautiful puzzle. And then I get to share it with people and see what they think, right? And the feedback is going to be, there will be positive bits and then there will be, hey, we would like you to work on this part or change this in some way and I can kind of, receive that as a call
Hmm.
to to continue like iterations that will take me closer to what they dream of having. And then when we're there, because everything happens in iterations, right? You go through rounds.
Right.
That do you prepare something and then you talk about it, and then you prepare something. You talk. That's how creative work goes.
Hmm.
And then when we finally arrive, it just feels like such an achievement.
Mm.
And the work of creation it drives me. It's what makes me get out of bed in the morning and feel really excited for what I'm going to do today.
Yeah. I love that. Um, yeah. So with your consulting company, Bubble Cap Consulting, um, how did you come up with the name Bubble Cap, and does it have any particular meaning to you?
I came up with the name Bubble Cap because I wanted it to be easy and memorable, and nobody can remember how to pronounce my last name, to be very honest about that.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's totally.
I made
I
you
was
do
looking for
verbatim.
I was like, "What's distillery related?" And it's very simple, and it's not a long Greek last name that people look at it and they go, "Oh, no."
So, not all of our listeners are going to know what a bubble cap is. Can you tell them what that is in distilling?
Yeah, a bubble cap is a part of the still. So you find bubble caps inside columns,
Hmm.
and they are there to improve reflux inside the column. So if you think of the column of a still, let's see, I'll take this down to like the foundational level because I want to bring everyone in,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
If
Definitely.
you think of a column as being like uh it purifies and kind of separates the spirit in a way.
Hmm.
Right? A spirit is a mixture of many things. And when you're distilling them, right, they come over little by little. You get your really volatile stuff at first, and you get your really rich and heavy flavors at the end of the distillation, and all sorts of things in the middle. And when you are using a column, it separates out your components more.
Yep.
And those columns aren't empty, they have all kinds of things in them, right? They can have plates inside the column where if you took a cross section and you look inside, you would see that there's liquid on the plate and there's all these bubbles coming up through the liquid,
Hmm.
right? As the steam passes through the column. And bubble caps are these little devices that encourage uh, the retention of liquid on the plate. So there's just enough liquid on the plate that the bubbles in the liquid are mixing with each other. And that helps with this process of separation,
Okay.
right? Separating these flavors in order to kind of draw out the distillation, and you can get a more concentrated spirit that way, and you can kind of separate different flavors from each other. And the whole point is to capture the flavor profile that you want at the ABV that you're looking for your particular product. So that's a bubble cap. A bubble cap is a little copper cap found inside the neck of a column on the plates, which isn't in every single column, but there's different kinds of plates you can use. Some of them have bubble caps. Some of them just have sieves. They're sieve trays. Some of them have donuts. Some of those columns are just packed with a packing material. There's lots of different ways to skin the cat,
Yeah.
so to speak. Yeah.
I won't let my
Yeah.
cat hear that part. But so as bubble cap consulting, you're kind of the
I
one.
like bubble cap because it is a technical term. Like it is a
Yeah.
little piece of technology.
Yeah.
It's a little piece of technology that I love because part of it is it's very mechanical. It's a piece of technology that's been around for a long time, since before we had computers and sensors, right?
Mhm.
Helping us drive our distillations. We've had copper bubble caps. And it's also related to flavor. So, and I'm a scientist who loves flavor.
Perfect.
Very cool. So I'm curious with your, let's say, take us into a day in the life of Anna, and you get a call on the phone. It's from a distillery, and they're asking for your consulting services. Um, are they typically asking you to solve a problem, or are they asking you for more of an enhancement of what they're already doing, or none of the
Well,
above?
I should say that the way these conversations I've started in the past is usually through networking and word of mouth.
Mhm.
And it may be me at a table with a few people, and somebody says, "Hey, here's a project that I'm working on with somebody else I know. Let's introduce you guys and have you talk about it." Right? And I've come on to projects at a few different points, I suppose, in the project. I have come onto a project when the product was just in people's imaginations and hadn't even been made yet. And that was a Four Corners gin. It was
Okay.
just in people's imaginations.
Mm.
And we were starting from the ground up with recipe development, creating something new. And I've also come onto a project where a business had acquired a new brand, right? And this brand has been around for a long time, and they are the new custodians of this established premium, just really excellent whiskey brands. And they're looking at their exceptional inventory and saying, what's something new that we can offer from this stock that we have?
Mm.
What's something new and exceptional that we can offer? And how are we going to choose the right barrels and build the right flavors that what we deliver to people is truly worth the price of a super premium bottle?
Mhm.
So there's I've been in both places, I suppose. I've been there from the beginning of product creation, and I've also been there for, a special release. And then with my, I would say, I'm tempted to kind of go back to my Westward work with this too,
Mhm.
because at Westward I was taking on technical development projects
Yeah.
as an employee, not as a consultant, but
Right.
it is definitely in my wheelhouse.
Mhm.
There were recipes that were like a real success, like a sourdough whiskey. It's a really successful whiskey. And then, I'm approached by Miles, the master blender, and he says, "We want to keep doing this in the future."
Mhm.
And it started off as this kind of like wild distillery experiment, and we really love it. Can you work on tightening up the recipe so that we get really consistent results
Right.
and we get the kind of deliverable results that we want every time? And that was a really rewarding project and the sort of thing that I, as a consultant, would love to bring to somebody else, right? If somebody has a product they're making in their distillery and the club loves it, it's doing really well, and it was kind of this one-off thing. And they want to think tank it with somebody and say, how can we make this like a nice, like regular offering where we know the fermentation is going to deliver the same results each time, and we know that our process will deliver the same results each time. I'm here for it.
Excellent.
S-
Awesome.
So I had a question. So you're seeing multiple distilleries, multiple different businesses. Is there a most common technical blind spot that you're running into that most distillers or most companies have? Is there a common problem in the industry that you're seeing?
I think, I think that's a better question for somebody who's just been consulting longer than I have.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know consultants with much longer client lists who have been doing it for decades, right?
Yeah.
And they're the people that I would approach with that question.
Okay.
Because I know what's going on in my circle,
Right.
and I know what my friends are doing, right? But I don't really have like the breadth of experience, I think, as some of the like other people I know who've been working on this stuff for decades.
Yeah. Even in your circle, are you seeing any common problems that people are running into?
Well, one thing I've heard of, and I think this is because these are the types of conversations I have,
Mhm.
is I've worked on yield improvement in the past,
Okay.
and it's something that I'm writing about now as part of my freelance writing.
Yeah.
So I have been talking to other consultants about yields, and and there are a lot of craft distilleries that start out as these really small operations with a vision and a passion, and they're started by people who used to brew or people who used to make wine, and they come up with this like cool recipe and they're doing it and they're really succeeding, and they never quite got like every single tool or every single technique that the big boys have,
Right.
because who has the money for that,
Right.
right? And they may be underperforming a little bit on their yields, and there's room for improvement in some of those processes that won't be detrimental to the whiskey. It
Right.
just gives you more from the resources that you have. If you can kind of sit down and evaluate your process and see where you've been, kind of like cooking grandma's recipe. And grandma's recipe works, but oops, sorry, I hit my microphone.
Okay.
Grandma's recipe works, but there could be points in the process where if we work on our mashing temperatures and technique and our transfers, we can get more yield for the grain that we put in.
Yeah.
That is a thing. That is also like a delicate conversation to have with people though, because we are so also attached to what we do, and
Right.
nobody wants it to boil down to yield,
Right.
right? We're artists. We're artists, and being low yielding isn't always bad when you're making something that is exceptional and you just
Right.
accept the trade-off.
Yeah.
Right. But not all those trade-offs have to exist. There are some avoidable trade-offs that you kind of learn when you get an outside perspective and you start talking through the technical details and maybe making some measurements you weren't making before. You find out that actually I could recover a little bit more here, and then I'm getting more for the resources I put in.
Yeah. That's something I'm dealing with at my work personally right now. And the difference between 3% waste and 1.5% waste is huge.
It can add up.
Yeah.
It can really add up. Yeah. And maybe we sit down and evaluate every stage of the process and find that actually there's no other way to make this really exceptional eau de vie
Yeah.
except the low yielding way. and it's amazing and not worth changing at all. Or maybe we'll sit down and look through the process and say, you know what, if you change your mashing temperatures just a little bit
Mm.
and watch these transfers and maybe like use the flow meter in the spot to make sure that you get what you think you're getting,
Mhm.
you'll get, 5 or 10% more. That's a big
That's
deal.
Huge. Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a technical side of the whole part of the industry that's kind of the, great and powerful Oz behind the curtain that you don't always get to see as a consumer, but that's so interesting from an industry perspective. And that, I was gonna go with the question of, does improving yield always improve quality? And it sounds like maybe that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes you want to stick with grandma's oatmeal chocolate chip cookies and don't mess with it. But like you were saying, sometimes when you get to that point of a distillery of like, okay, I want to make that next step into making this a more larger and more commercially available product that yeah, you can start to tweak with those aspects of the whole process to get something a little bit more that you want.
Yeah. And it really helps. And it becomes, I guess, really important when scaling.
Yeah.
Because if you are talking about, we would like the money to install a new fermenter because we're scaling up, then somebody might ask you, are you making the most of what you already have?
Mm.
Right? Are you really getting everything you think you're getting out of the mashing and the fermenters that you have and the setup that you have? And if there's improvement to be made there first, then you maybe put in that position, right? Of like
Right.
demonstrating, right? That we for the quality and the product that we're making, we have the best efficiency that we can have. And now we really need another device or another fermenter or an upgrade,
Mhm.
right? So it can be used, you know, uh, ensuring that your yields are where you want them can be really important in justifying upgrades as you scale. That's one way I've seen these conversations happen.
Yeah,
If that
and
makes sense.
it
Yeah,
totally
definitely.
does. And I'm so interested, like as a consultant, um, how you thread the needle. You're coming into someone else's um you know, home, if you will, and you're judging their children almost, so to speak. How do you navigate that delicate balance between, okay, you're hiring me to speak full throated on a particular topic and yet have the sensitivity to, provide them with something, but you know, do you come with the approach of like, yeah, you're hiring me to do this, so I'm just going to lay it all out on the table, take it, leave it? Or do you find that you kind of have to, again, thread that needle and maybe tread lightly or in a particular manner to have it land?
Yeah, absolutely. So I find I rely a lot on soft skills there.
Mhm.
Because I'd say the last time I was invited to, evaluate process and make recommendations for process at another distillery, I I hadn't, met anyone there before. I hadn't established a pre-existing relationship,
Right.
right? But I was there because, part of this project was a contract distilling project, and part of it was, kind of besides the contract distilling project that I was working on was they wanted me to give them feedback on their system.
Mhm.
And I always start by just sort of getting to know people and how each person is connected to the process so that I can find ways to honor what they have done. Because when you're walking into someone's facility and you're looking at all this work that other people have done and you're there to be the outside pair of eyes and say, here's how I think you could improve some things. You're you're taking a critical eye to many years of work
Yeah.
and blood, sweat, and tears that other
Yeah.
people put in, and I don't take that lightly.
Totally.
So I find ways to recognize and honor what other people did and to understand where the decisions came from because usually the decisions are driven by need. They're driven by need and circumstances. maybe there was a limitation in what people knew at the time. Maybe there was just a limitation in what people could afford at the time,
Right.
and they made it work. And that's wonderful because they're doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And they're putting their product out there and and they managed it under the circumstances where they started. Nobody starts under the best circumstances. And finding ways to recognize that I think makes the conversation much easier because it signals that I really respect what they've done to this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I bring as much humility to the table as I can in honoring what they've done to this point, while also saying, here are some things that I've noticed where I think that you could try something different and new, and it could be an improvement for you. Yeah.
Totally. Well, I really appreciate your perspective on the spirits industry and your whole process and your consulting business. I think you have a really beautiful story, and um, I kind of identify with it in the sense of, I think a lot of people these days can maybe not feel that this world that their experience is necessarily built for them. And some people can get lost in that. Some people can take it for what it is and cobble something together to say, I am a unique individual and this is how I fit into the world and make something of it. So I really want to
I have heard
recognize you.
so many stories.
Yeah.
I've heard so many stories since I started talking about synesthesia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to be afraid of even bringing it up, but now I'm just like, screw it.
Yeah.
I've had enough people ask me that I've actually begun to believe, oh, people want to hear me talk about this.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
interesting.
not boring the pants off of anyone by talking about
Yeah.
this. And I've had speaking engagements.
Right.
I have one coming up in August at ADI. I'll be talking about synesthesia. I spoke about my synesthesia at a synesthesia conference in Amsterdam, and I spoke about it at the Worldwide Distilled Spirits Conference in Edinburgh last month. And every time I talk about synesthesia, I go up there. There's a little voice in the back of my head that says, "Who wants to hear about your weird brain? It's not like other people's brains, so why would they even want to know?" And when I come down, there's somebody waiting for me.
Everybody.
And they're like, I need to tell you about something I experienced. And it's
Yeah.
wildly different. It's not the same as me. It could be completely different. But they're so excited to finally be able to share this thing that has been locked inside them all this time because they knew that other people weren't necessarily sharing the experience and they didn't even know how to put it into words.
Yeah.
And it just brings home the fact that we all live in our own sensory worlds. And we all live in our own unique brains. And there's such a just a diversity of experience in this world when people sit down to taste spirits.
Yeah.
And I celebrate that. I celebrate that and I love finding it in the industry. If you feel completely alone in the way you experience flavor in a way that separates you from the people around you, it can be isolating, it can be depressing, and you can be trapped in your own prison of anxiety around it, which is how I used to be,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I want to like kick the door open and let people have more conversations about how we're all a little weird in the
Yeah.
ways that we taste differently from each other because that leads to so much growth and new insight and experimentation. And when people find really original new ways to do things, that is a victory every time.
That's awesome.
I love that. And I was going to ask you final thoughts, but I
I think
think
that's
that is such a great final thought. And I just want to wrap it up with where can people find you? Obviously, this is a little bit more of an industry leaning podcast that we're having today, but I imagine we have some industry listening folks. And if they're interested in, reaching out to you and possibly, employing some of your services with Bubble Cap Consulting, where can folks find you?
So I have a website, bubblecapconsulting.com.
Mm-hmm.
They are welcome to email me, Anna at bubblecapconsulting.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and I have an Instagram. Gotta remember the one I gotta hold my hand this way. I was traveling in Europe and that was where I was like, don't turn it around, Donna. Hold your hand this way when you hold up number 2. All right, there I did it. I also have LinkedIn and Instagram. My Instagram is at anna.distills. And I try to really moderate my Instagram usage. So there may be a delay in my replies to new message contacts on Instagram.
Cool.
Just FYI.
Totally. Well,
Awesome.
thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for being so open, just with your whole experience in life and the spirits industry in general. It was great meeting you at the American Craft Spirits Association conference. And I'm so glad we could make the
Yeah.
connection and have you on today. So thanks, Anna, for joining us. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers, guys. This was a great conversation.
Thanks so
Oh,
much.
I didn't actually pour my whiskey. Damn it.
You still have a chance.
Here's my chance. I'm pouring the Tsiparo because I was in Greece between conferences last month and I proposed to my fiance and she said yes. So
Beautiful.
Congratulations. Cheers
celebration.
again.
Cheers to that.